Hey, hello, folks. So before I start, actually, I want to just get an idea of what kind of people we have in the room. So, can I get one who has got BPMN or knows what BP? Yeah. Okay. Great. Who here has BPMN? We got who has BP production? Production. Okay. What about DMN? Who knows? We got it. We right now? Yeah. Okay. Maybe. So, oh my DMN folks. Okay, like four. Okay, not bad. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to be able to tailor this more towards understanding BPMN in the context of BPMN, which is kind of the point of this. I'm Niall Deehan. I'm a consultant with Camunda, and I'm just going to show you some of the sort of the power that you get when you leverage DMN along with BPMN. Is this thing going to keep cutting out, or are we working on it? Okay. Okay. So first of all, what we call the case for workflow. Why do you use workflows at all? And I think everyone here is sort of already convinced, but to go through the points of it, first of all, generally within a process, your work is distributed in various ways. So we have here where we're deciding something at the beginning there, we are sending something there, and these are two different parts of a system, maybe two different systems entirely, perhaps. We in this process have to handle certain events. So something like we have a receive task there, which is sort of in this thing here, where we are receive events. So we're waiting to receive some kind of message arrive at some point and respond to it. So it has to be oriented towards handling events. We also have timer. Of course, well, again, if it elapses, the process forward. There's also a requirement for maybe. I'm not sure which words. Okay, we're back for a second. So this process slowly, maybe it'll pick up most. Have we got? Yeah. Oh no, there we go. Okay. We almost look at slides. So I'll try and use a lot of hand gestures. So the very bottom thing there is process visibility. Oh, you can read. And process of a process of our own, which is this guy. So here's a running process within Camunda. It's the lead generation process, I think the marketing guys call it. And this is when you go to the website and you ask for something like, let's say you're interested in like a trial for the enterprise version of our software, or you're interested in a poster or something. So you see that every inquiry comes through at this point, and what this sort of visibility gives us is the points at which, obviously the far end there is where people actually purchase something. So you see that we have certain points where this drops off a little bit, and we see the point at which most people get, or not people, but most processes reach a certain point and sort of, I think, as opposed to this area here, they seem to sort of dip off around that area. And what this is just a visualization based on the history of our process. It's the most common path through our process based on the token flow. So it's how the tokens have actually, or the process instances have moved through the process, and how these things have actually been added or how they've been executed. And that's a very nice part of processing. It means that we can handle events, we can handle asynchronous processing, we can handle different types of different types of distributed work, of course. All at the same time getting this visualization thing that's really, really handy. So processes are a really great thing to actually implement when it comes to that way. But it does have a little problem, and that's to do with rules, of course. Those of you who have maybe used BPMN as a method of describing rules have maybe come across the problem that rules are a bit of a pain to create in BPMN. In this concept, it's really simple. We have a certain season and a certain number of guests, and we have to decide what to cook for that particular scenario. And this is only 2 parameters, but we have to take into account loads of different combinations. And this has all sorts of problems. BPMN is very easy to understand as business IT alignment is a big factor in that. And this sort of breaks that concept because it's really hard to actually understand what it is that's going on here. So OMG, in their wisdom, decided to create a decision model notation. I think 1.1 was released in December of last year. And this is a similar concept in that it's allowing you to build executable models, but instead of modeling processes, we're simply modeling rules. And with DMN, we have a series of inputs, 1 or more, and for each of those inputs, it runs down the table, and then eventually each line is referred to as a rule. And when it finds one that matches, in this case, our input is a skill level of principal. It's got a language of German, and it's got an estimated hours of 44. And you can see here that irrelevant of, it doesn't matter what skill level you are, as long as they are in German. Apparently hours don't matter to Wolfgang because he will do anything. So this is a job that can be assigned automatically to that particular output. So the concept is, or the idea is that we should be sort of moving away from trying to model rules at all in BPMN, if you already do. A lot of people don't either. A lot of people can also implement rules engines. But for something like this, which is in truth a relatively simple decision, it's sort of between this gigantic sort of rules engine thing that you're going to need to have really complex rules, and instead it's something that probably should belong in a easy to manage, easy to edit, and easy to understand business IT alignment sort of space. So instead of that, we would sort of remove it. We would use the existing BPMN symbol for business rules task, and this guy here would actually call our rules engine. Okay. So that is actually, luckily enough for me, all the slides for now, because I'm going to just go ahead and maybe create something like this. So I'm going to generate a BPMN model. I'm going to create a DMN table, and just going to make it run and see how quick and easy it is to actually manage this thing, because that is the most important thing. So let's see what we can do. Fantastic. So I'm going to do this inside Eclipse. The IDE doesn't really matter, but I happen to have built a project in here using our Maven archetype. And if you can see that, yeah, it's not so bad. You can see that it's got sort of a process application class. It's got a logger in there. It's got 2 models in the resources. And importantly enough, it's just got all the dependencies required to run Camunda's engine and stuff like that. That's the DMN engine and the BPMN one. So I'm going to start by really simply creating a BPMN process in the modeler. So yep, this is a very quick process, but we'll maybe add to it to make it a little more interesting. So I'm going to just use the modeler here to create a simple little BPMN thing. We're going to have let's see, enter. I'm going to be very topical now and decide to choose candidate, and that'll be a user task, and then we can have a nice gateway here, or maybe we'll put a DMN table straight after this, and this DMN table will call, let's say, so sort of decide on reaction, and yeah, and then the reaction can be, this is an XOR gateway, so it'll either be this guy here, which would be move to Canada, or also maybe, I don't know, stay where you are. Okay, and these guys are just 2 little user tasks. Fantastic. And as I said, right now I'm just actually defining this in design time. So I'm just like, so far nothing this is necessarily executable beyond the XML of the BPMN itself. So while we built all that, the XML for the BPMN, which is adhering to the standard, is being created in the background. So we have this nice model that's going to allow us to do some stuff. I'm going to also create the Dmn model for there. So I'm going to, in the same modeler, actually I might even have it in my thing. There it is. So this is an empty table. So this will be, let's say, go with vote. And we will have, again, an input, which is going to be called our choice or candidate. I'm also going to change the hit policy, because with DMN, a nice ability that DMN has that really does change how tables work is how the hit policy works. So unique means that only one and only one rule is allowed to match. And that's really useful if you have a table that you intend to cover all possible input options, but without actually any crossover. In our case, we're going to go with first, meaning that it'll go through each rule individually, and the first one that matches will actually be returned. So the order is really important in this one. So candidate, we're going to have, let's go with, so I'm also going to have an output, of course, because that tends to help. And let's go with reaction, and it's going to be string as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some input values. These are the values that are allowed for this input. So I'm just going to simply put Clinton, Trump, Johnson. Any Johnson fans? No? Okay. 9%, that's not so bad. And then maybe other, certainly the most popular of the four. Okay, and I'm just going to decide, okay, well, if maybe Clinton is there, so that's our first one. And in fact, maybe let's say Clinton or Johnson. Then we can have a certain output, which could be, let's just type it in here. It could be just say everything is fine, which is a bit of an overreaction, but okay. So and then we can maybe have this guy, whoever that is, and we can maybe have something like move. And finally, of course, we could have the other option, which is just great choice. Okay. So it's a really, really simple table. It's going to go through, and the fact I have two guys here and a little comma means that if Clinton or Johnson are decided, we get the same output. And if Trump is the input, then we get move, and if other, we get great choice. So again, I've done nothing but do design time stuff so far. So now I'm just going to go into actually making this, giving it the execution parameters. So in this case, I'm just going to click this little guy here, which gives us a couple of extra fields to play with. So this is first of all the actual key of the table. This is the key the engine needs for something like versioning. So if I change this table, I could have multiple versions of the table running, but it would always have the same key. So I'm going to then say candidate, and the output is going to be reaction. Okay, and that's essentially available now to be sort of deployed and run. That's pretty much all you need to actually make it executable. If you're interested, this little language in here, which we'll go into in more detail later, is Feel, the friendly enough expression language. And that's, again, part of the DMN standards. So that can do some other bits and pieces, like it can have ranges on numbers and things like that, all the usual expression stuff. The concept is that it should be easy to read by an analyst, and so it's maybe not as powerful as like as an explicit expression language, but it's still pretty good for business IT alignment. Okay, so I'll save that. Now I need to go to my BPMN model and turn this into something a little more executable. So let's have this guy here, and I'm just going to create, so I can use Camunda's form fields as a prototyping mechanism. This will actually describe the fields required for this UI. Usually you would actually maybe create a proper UI and not embed it in the XML, but this is what this will be doing. So I'm just going to create candidate. It's going to be an enum, and pick your poison. And I'm just going to have the names of the folks. So And then another one for Johnson. And of course, our personal favorite, other. Okay, and that will actually create a variable called candidate from the selected, from whatever the user actually selects. So I don't need actually any data mapping at all because it's all part of the same context. Instead, I just need to tell the engine how to actually implement this business rules task. So you can see we have a few different options. We can still, of course, just run a Java class to do the rules if we want. We can call some sort of external process that would poll and try and run it that way. But in this case, of course, we're going to use DMN. And I'm just going to use the decision reference, which is the same key as I have here. Okay, and put that there. And now we're just going to have a results variable. So the thing we can get back is going to be, let's say, let's call it result. Result, great. And that's going to be a single entry. So the reason for this dropdown is because it's of course possible to have, in my case, I have a single output column and I have a single rule that will match. But with DMN, you can actually have loads of rules that match and multiple outputs. So you could go from having like a single variable to a map of maps, depending on your output. In this case, though, it's pretty straightforward. Next, we need this guy here. So we're going to execute this part of the model. It's just the gateway. So I'm going to just create a condition for this gateway. In this case, it's going to be, again, I'm using unified expression language to say if the variable, what was it called? Result. So I'm going to say if result equals, let's say, oops, for bracket, move, then we'll go this way, and I'll just turn this into the default flow. So for any other scenario, we'll go this way. Okay, so I'm not going to do too much with these guys. They'll probably just run themselves, so I'll just save that. And now back into our dev environment, so I'll just refresh that, and right now I'm actually running Camunda on a Wi-Fi container. So I've got the engine there and I've got the REST API, but I also have the front end, which is written in AngularJS, which communicates to the engine over REST. And in Cockpit, we can actually have an overview of our processes. So we can see here that we have 3 processes currently running. I'll talk about this guy a little later on, but now I'm just going to deploy my new fun process. And I'm just going to give it a nice name, which is, it's already got a nice name. And I'm just going to see if I can deploy that from Eclipse. I'm going to use Maven, Maven's deployment, deployment add-on for Eclipse to be able to just use this wildfly deploy thing. So I'll send that along. And that'll hopefully find that I have wildfly deployed here. And we should see that it'll get this process application deployed. The engine will then pick up that it's got some tables. There we go. And it'll then appear on the front end. So if I refresh this, here we go. Okay, so there we have our DevOps thing. We also have in decisions, we have vote. So we have our table, which is there, which is great. So that's all fantastic. But now I'm actually going to run this process. So I'm going to go to task list, which is our sort of front end intended for people who would start processes or complete work as part of processes, and just start. I'm going to select DevOps and just start the process. So now we have our first task, which is here. It's our choose candidate. As I showed, I just sort of created a really simple front end just for to make it quick rather than useful. And so tough choice. Any preferences from anyone? No one too scared to say? Too soon? Okay. I'm going to go with other just to why not? And oh, look, we have a new task called Stay Where You Are. So we can see that we have progressed through the process, and of course we went through the default version. I'm going to start a few more just to make sure that my gateway works. And maybe one more. And I would do the unthinkable and do that. Oh, tump. That's spelled incredibly wrong. This would probably go the same way. Oh, no, it didn't. Great. So yes, so now from Cockpit's perspective, if I refresh, this is more of an admin point of view. So we have all of the points in which the all the process is running in their current location. So that's a really simple way of just being able to create these DMN models and add them. But I kind of want to show you a more interesting example, a more sort of useful use case. And that's with this guy here. So this is a process that actually combines two use cases that people use that we've actually helped develop before. So the first one is a user assignment DMN table. So this is given certain criteria, we want to make sure the right person does a certain task in our BPMN process. And that's a really common use case that we've come across for DMN. We also have another DMN use case here where, given some information, I would like to know, in this case, the fraud score. So given all this information, what are the chances that what I'm looking at has the possibility of fraud? And again, these come from use cases in that we've actually come across from people using DMN and BPMN. So I'll just start this process, which the concept of this is that someone has some sort of insurance payout and they've broken something and they want their money for the insurance they've been paying the whole time. So I'm going to just start application, and we first need a client name, and his name is Rocket Crocodile apparently, and I'll just choose a file to upload. Okay, and start. So next I'm at the point now where I'm at my user task, and I have again a nice file, but this time it's a little more interesting. I can download the file if I want. I have the name required, but now I'm being asked for 3 different parameters. I'm asked for the region we're currently in. Let's go up Berlin, and claim type car, and let's say it's 600 is the amount. So when I complete that, it does go to the next process, but you can also see that we now up here have Dave as the assignee. So Dave has been automatically assigned to this task. From Cockpit's perspective, if I refresh this page, we should see that the process has moved to here. And if we wanted to find out why Dave, for instance, got assigned to this task, we take a look at the history of this process instance and see the path it took. And then we can select here and find out the DMN table that actually ran and the actual values that were actually passed into it. So here we have, this again is the same table we saw, a similar table, same hit policy, it's first, meaning that it'll take all this, it'll take each rule one at a time in the order and return whichever one is true first, which means multiple could be true, but the only one will be returned. So the first type is car, the claim type is car, so we went as far as here, and this person, if you leave it blank in DMN, it means that it doesn't matter what the input is, we'll just accept that as a true value. We also have a region, which we Berlin, and the claim amount is between 0 and 10,000, then Dave can handle it. Okay, so we can also then decide, that's why Dave got assigned to that, and from an execution perspective, what that looks like is pretty simple. Let's see if I actually have that model somewhere. Maybe I shall show that later on. So next up, let's actually complete this part of the task. So unfortunately for Dave, I'm going to take this off him and claim it for myself. So this is something that is part of the history of the task. So a task itself has its own life cycle because, of course, it can be passed to different users. So we can see here that we unassigned Dave and assigned ourselves. We could also, if we preferred Mary or something, we could give Mary access instead. It all depends on, of course, permissions and things. So now that I actually have access, I can answer some questions about this. So again, from a process perspective, we are now at the enter application details. And we are being asked how many payments have been rejected for this client, or has a payment been rejected for this client? And we can say, no, how many payments have we actually put out there in the past? We can, pick a number, let's say 19's high, 10. Does this client have a history of fraud? We can say no, but do you personally suspect that there's some sort of fraud involved? And we're going to say yes in this case. Okay, so we are now at this lovely new task here. And we've passed through the fraud check table, which is a far more complicated table. And what we've got in the end is, we've got 2 things. We have, first of all, the fraud score that was generated. So let's take a look at why that got generated. There's our instance. So we can go to history, select the instance, and then go to our fraud score. And let's take a look at the decision instance. So this is a much more interesting table. It's a little more complex. So in this case, you can see way more than just one row has been activated, but we only got one result. So that's down to the hit policy in the top left there. That's a collect sum, meaning that if the output is going to be an integer, then we can actually add up every rule that matched and send back a single variable. So in this case, we can see that we have a rule saying that if payment has been rejected in the past is no, then we get 20 points. And if there's no history fraud, we also get 20. And also if those things are combined and it's a very small amount, it's plus 75. We also have a thing here where if there are more than 10 payouts, then maybe, and there's no history fraud, we still maybe give them minus 10. So in the end, we ended up getting this 105 score. So there's one other nice little addition to this, which is, of course, that this task is also given a priority. So we use that fraud score to, as well as inform the user of the score, we give this task a priority within the engine so that you can say ones with the least likelihood of being fraudulent will be like dealt with sooner. It's a nice way of actually dealing with that sort of thing. So we also have the analyst's opinion, which is true. And we also have the option of, do we want to audit this claim? So one other really nice thing about DMN is the fact that we can actually edit these tables in real time or in runtime, which is kind of the point of being able to use rules. So I want to actually use this analyst value, whatever this analyst decides, as part of the table, because I want to like give points if the analyst thinks it's not a fraud, for instance. So to do that, we would actually go to cockpit here, go to our decisions and go to, let's see, probably determine fraud score. Okay, so here's our table, and I'm just going to go and find out the name of that variable, and it should be here somewhere. There's the process. So you can see that I have the output variable here as the username, and in order to, I just reuse that thing right here as an expression. So in runtime, it would just get the value from this table and just assign it to this task. We also have a form in here. That's in the form. Fantastic. So let's go find the form. It will be in. Actually, I can just check here, because I can actually check the variables that exist. That's a much smarter idea. So I can take a look at the variables. There is, let's see, the variable user determined fraud is the one I want to use. So I'll just take that, and I'll just go back to my decision here, and I'll just edit this table. So I'll just edit this, and then I'm just going to enter it in advanced mode. I'm going to add a new row, and this is just thoughts, or let's go with gut feeling. And this is going to use the variable user determined fraud, and it is a Boolean. And because it's a Boolean, we can then exit advanced mode, and we can choose yes or no. So I want to add a new row, maybe here. Just drag it up a little bit. And I'm just going to say, okay, if it is, then we're going to, if the gut feeling of fraud is yes, then we're going to give them like minus, I don't know, how much do you trust an analyst? 15? That seems all right. And we'll say that we'll add another row below it. Let's just copy below. And we'll say, I don't know, plus 15. Okay, and so that table there has been edited, and I can proceed. This is going to deploy this as the new version of this table. So as you can see, we have a lovely warning, you're playing with fire, because obviously once we deploy this, any new processes that come across this table or have been calling this table will end up using this new version. So we can deploy that. It's also possible to call other versions specifically by IED, but generally it's a good idea to just say you can just link to the newest version of the table. So great stuff. So now we do have that lovely table that is deployed there, but of course it's too late for us. We're beyond that point. So I'm going to just actually take this token and I'm just going to drag it and drop it back, I don't know, here maybe, to run that table again. So this is just going to just the ability to sort of change state a little relatively easily. And I'm just going to apply that. And what should happen is we should be in the same place. And in task list, we should, if we see this, have a different score, which is possible. So we can actually check the history of this. So if I check the history of this process so far, we can see that we've actually run this twice. And by selecting here and checking how this thing worked out, if I got that variable correct, it didn't even run the new version. Why did I not do that? Instead, maybe I should...
I think you gave it yes on both occasions.
Oh, did I? Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. What this guy? That's a problem then. Okay, well, we had to go wrong eventually. Oh wait, I've got it's tenant stuff. Okay, so there is my yes in both occasions. You're right. Instead, I'm actually going to do, so I'm actually using tenants in this particular example, which is probably a bad idea. So instead, I'm going to log into vote and just change this thing and see if this works. So I can edit this and just in a really simple way, in that I'm just going to replace this with fantastic, get rid of great choice, fantastic. Okay, and proceed and just generate that. Okay, so unfortunately it doesn't really demonstrate things greatly, but my tenant problem is going to be an issue. I can redeploy with no tenant. That could work. Let's do that. So I'm going to turn the tenants off. This is all sort of... Okay, bye-bye tenant ID. So did I mention that we have multi-tenancy supported? Now let's actually see. We get a fantastic demo of versioning as well. So this is actually a blessing in disguise. So I'm going to just select our workspace. It's going to be just dev, and I'm going to deploy that. And I wonder what will happen. Sure, we'll see. How did it deploy okay? Oh, it's still building. Okay, that seems to work okay. So let's refresh this. Fantastic. So here's a fun thing. So we have our process in the wrong place. So let's see if I can start it again. Or can I migrate it? Yeah, I probably can. So I'm actually going to just... Where is my instance gone? Water process. Okay, that's going to work on there. Alrighty, now it's going to have to do the hard way and just actually start it again. So let's speed through this a bit. Let's go to a different place. Let's go to Dublin for a change. And let's see, my home broke and it didn't cost me too much. And okay, Wolfgang got assigned this time. Sorry, Wolfgang. And I'm going to say that yes, no, 500, 55, and yeah, let's go see how that works. Okay, so now we got 10 as a fraud score. And let's take a look at where that is. So that should be here somewhere. Okay, great. Now let's take a look at the history. And I ran the wrong one. Fantastic. That's probably because I created the wrong thing. So it's version 2 of the definition. Let's see. Okay. Let's try this one more time. see. We shall again grab that variable name, which was called user fraud. I'm going to again add that as an expression. It's going to be just the good feeling, and hopefully I get a good feeling about this actually working. So we'll see. Let's add a new row below it, and let's just say that's going to be a boolean, and down here let's just say yes and 15, and I'll leave out no for now. Okay. Okay. Runtime, fantastic. Okay, and now for the moment of truth. Decisions. Fantastic, it actually worked. So, barring some tenant problems, it does actually end up working pretty okay in the end. You can also actually deploy things via the REST API as well. I happen to be using Eclipse during most of that. That's perfectly fine. But also if we wanted to actually change this, we can sort of change this from either a safe place, like right here, I could actually do a change to my model and also just decide to have a second input and then sort of verify that using the Java API locally. So you would actually make changes to your model, and then using a really simply using the Java API to test it, we can actually start up the engine and run through it to make sure that the DMN table or the new version that actually will run correctly and actually give us the required results that we would expect. And so we can sort of start this instance, and let's say this process, this lovely guy here, would have a certain requirement. So I'm just going to start this up in here. The first thing is, the first line here is just saying to get the engine, get the runtime service, and start a process instance by a specific key. So this one line here will sort of take our current deployment. It'll actually deploy it in the engine in memory. And the nice thing is it'll also catch loads of problems you might have, like if you've forgotten to implement gateways or if you've forgotten to implement service tasks, that sort of thing. That'll be caught at this point. So that seems to have worked, but now I want to do something a little more interesting. So we can then say something like, let's get the task service, because the first thing is going to be add a task. So I'm going to just create a task query. In reality, of course, you would normally add loads of parameters about trying to find tasks for a certain process definition and a certain user. But in this case, I know I've started this in a test, so I can simply ask for a single result. And let's just import that. And then we can do some sort of assert at this point, and then to work out actually what in this task we've actually, that this task is the one we expect, but instead I'm actually just going to complete this with some variables. So we can then say, let's say, rule dot get task service dot complete. And then we just give it the task dot, extra K there, task. Interesting. Get ID. And of course we should also maybe pass in a map of some variables. We actually need specifically the, let me just grab the map from here because it's already there. So we need the input that would have been given to us from this particular user task. And let me just add that. Okay. And I'm going to put in what we want, which is if we want a candidate, let's grab that. And that candidate is going to be Clinton. Okay. And now we just complete this task with our variables. And save. There we go. Okay, so this will then run our process and then test our table or break, either or. Oh, fantastic. It's got some sort of problem with the task. Okay, let's see actually what would have happened. So, that actually looks okay. Let's see, the error. So, nicely enough actually about the error is it actually shows you how far we got. So we completed the task, but there's some sort of problem there, and it said that no decision definition deployed with vote. Ah, fantastic. So what's actually happened is that we have defined the resources for this, and you can see that I've defined just the BPMN model. So I actually just forgot to add the our second DMN table, which is vote.dmn. So I'll just say vote.dmn. Okay. So that should find that now. So yeah, useful error, that's quite nice. Okay, we get a lovely little tick box there, so that all went pretty well. So we can then sort of ask for what variables we get back. So we would expect that from that table that we would get back a variable called, actually let's open it in the modeler. We would get back everything is fine as an actual reaction. So we can specifically ask for, let's see, rule dot get runtime service dot get variable from the execution. We could variable local. Variable query. Maybe it's a bad idea to do that actually. Instead I should just list, and then I'll just see what sort of variables we have in our system at that point. Okay, so let's see what happens. So we'll get that far and then print out the variables. It's also a good idea to use asserts. Okay, and we have there that name is candidate. There's the execution. Wow, there's way too much information in there. Well, name is candidate, yeah. Oh. Somewhere in there is dot, let's see, values. It does show that up. Okay, so the final thing I want to do is actually show you how sort of versioning works from a BPMN perspective. So we saw that we can change our DMN table in runtime, but we also change these models, of course. And the main reason that using DMN might be a better option than using BPMN for these is because using BPMN requires a certain amount of redeploying and dealing with running instances. So if we take this guy, for instance, and we decide that we also have, let's say, we want to maybe calm down before making a decision, I might want to maybe add a timer here or something. So I can add maybe a little timer that's just, maybe just a few minutes and have a duration of PT 5 minutes. So before anything a reaction happens, we'll just wait for 5 minutes. And let's say we also want, let's add just some other bits and pieces to make it more interesting. So let's also have a parallel gateway or something in here. So that'll also maybe run some task here, let's say, for instance. And that can be a user task. And so I've changed this model kind of quite a bit. So and we can see that a lot has changed about it. The XML is completely different, and I'm going to save that, and that should be enough to deploy. I'm just going to make sure that I have some stuff actually running, so I'm going to start a new instance of my DevOps process, just a few of them, because we right now have, in our DevOps process, we now have 5 instances running. So deploying this new thing will actually run as, let's go and deploy that. So an important thing is how this affects running instances. The nice thing about DMN, of course, is that because the thing is going to run in memory, it's never going to have the same problem as having to deal with long-running processes. It's going to be called, and in fact, you can call it directly from the REST API as well. So you don't even need a BPM model to run these. So let's see. So right now I've deployed that. We can see that our current version, if I refresh this, we have this lovely thing where yes, everything is still actually running, and that's not a problem, which is, you know, what's been happening so far. We have a second version right here that's also running. The same DMN table is being called, but the process has been updated. By default, of course, we have this lovely thing here where we have loads of instances running in the wrong version, and you kind of end up then having the option of being able to migrate those. So to migrate these, you can see that we have version 1 right here and version 2 here. It has an automated migration plan because it's pretty easy because they have the same IDs on the tasks. But you don't have to go with migration plans. You can actually decide that if we're here, maybe we want to go down here instead for whatever reason. So you can change the migration plan. You also don't need to move it to the same process definition. You can also change the process definition as well. So I'm going to just select some instances here. I'll just select them all, and we'll get another you're playing with fire. Again, you're moving all these processes to a new version, so you need to make sure we have the payload here for the REST call that would actually be made to run this, so it might be a nice idea to test some of this. And you can do it asynchronously if you have maybe a couple of, maybe 1,000 tasks or something, but this is only 4, so we can do that pretty well. And that's the migration done. And if we go back to our process, we still have 5 instances running, but now, of course, they're running in the new version, which is, you know, a really, really handy way of doing it. But it's still, of course, it's a nice way of being able to maintain multiple versions of both BPMN models and DMN models. Okay, so I'll just return to my slides for the last few minutes. Okay, so it's also kind of good to know where these things fit in and sort of what use cases exist for these, and they're actually kind of all over the place. One of them would be Zalando, which is a large fashion retailer online, and they of course use Camunda for all of their processing and decision making. So they have this very, very nice process that's you should read about it. It's very interesting. It's got maybe over 1,000 instances launched per second. It needs a lot of throughput and needs a lot of work behind it. And these sort of features really help it. But also, on the other end of the spectrum, we have, and it's very user-focused, which is important. So we get data, and based on what the user's inputted, we'll change a different direction. Also, another company that's been using Camunda for a completely other side of the world, and that's the NASA, and they've been using Camunda for something we're not allowed to talk about, but I have a picture there. So we that sort of a concept is entirely throughput. So that's no user interaction whatsoever, but instead it's used rules and DMN for our BPMN to orchestrate entirely automated processes. So you can do a lot of both. And so the options are pretty vast for this sort of orchestration. It doesn't necessarily have to be about user tasks, but it can be about fully automated systems. Okay, so now we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm wondering if we have any questions for me. Yes?
Which of the features that you demoed are in the commercial version and which are in the free?
Oh, great question. So let me quickly mention that the engine itself, like everything we saw in terms of abilities, is open source. So there's no secret API or something in the closed source version. Camunda itself is an open source project, for those who don't already know. Some things I did in Cockpit are enterprise-only implementations of our API. So the two main ones were dragging and dropping a token, and that's on the commercial version, and migrating process instances is also in the commercial version. I think that's it. Possibly editing DMN tables, though I don't remember.
Migration is possible, but not through the GUI.
Precisely, yeah. So the actual implementation, it's an implementation of our open API. So everything you saw there was over REST. So that REST API is totally open. There's nothing about the engine that's closed source at all. Okay, super. Yes?
In your unit test, you used something called rules dot something?
Sure.
Where did that come from?
Oh, sir. So I used, during my unit test, I called essentially the process engine, which is injected actually into the unit test. That's where that came from. Super. Anything else? Yes, we over there.
There, you were able to drag an instance of the process.
Ye-
You can also duplicate it.
So you asked about I was able to drag the instance of my process from one place to another, but could I actually duplicate a token instead of dragging it? Is that correct? Yeah. So let me just actually show you that, because that is possible. So if I happen to cancel one token and then produce another one, but in runtime you can do something like this where we can select an instance and then it's right here, so I can decide to actually use this little guy here to start a token from sort of scratch. So you can start before. This is a really useful feature for testing especially. The API so I now have two tokens running in a single instance. Now the really important part of this is not that I can do this here, because it's not actually all that useful to create a second token in runtime. It's far more interesting for testing, because I can create a token at a starting point at any point in my process using the API. So I don't have to start at the start event. Instead, I can decide I've got a really long process and I just want to test this bit. So I want to start the process, but I want to start it here with this payload. You can also start a process with multiple tokens and payload, and it's really, really useful for that. Okay. Anything else? Nope. We're okay.
History is also available through REST API.
It is indeed, yeah. So that's actually to do with, so there's a reason why we have a history drop-down and a runtime drop-down. So we've actually got two sets of tables, and that's kind of important for performance. So runtime tables actually contain just all the running instances of your process. So that would mean that we would have any running processes, and all information the engine needs to run is in the runtime tables. As soon as a process finishes, it disappears from those. We're not interested in that process anymore. But the history tables, they actually store all processes that are currently running and all processes that are finished. So the history tables themselves are not a requirement for the engine. You can actually run the engine without any history at all. It'd be really quick, but you wouldn't be able to see anything that's finished. So the reason the history is a separate thing completely is because we're now accessing a different API. We're asking what has happened. And we can do stuff like being able to see something like this, which, let's see, something more interesting, maybe something like, there we go. So this is just querying the history of the process to find out what the most common path through the process is. As far as history is concerned, we also store every single point which the token has passed, but also every version of each variable. So if a variable is changed throughout the process, you can always find where it was changed, what time it was changed, and what the old value was. And that granularity is actually sort of selectable. You can actually decide whether you want to do that, or if you just want to know where the tokens have been. So you don't really have to. You can change how the history works. The history view, I think actually might be enterprise version, but the actual API, of course, is totally open. So you can always access that if it's available. Alrighty, any questions? No. Okay, well, we can leave it there, and I'll just say thanks a lot for attending and joining. I hope it was useful. If you do have any more questions, you want to talk to me myself, we do have a booth somewhere down there on the on the floor below. You can come and chat to me about any specific things you'd like to talk about Camunda or the standards themselves. Super. So thanks very much, everybody, and maybe I'll see you later.